Selling book. Now look at that name. How would you pronounce that name?
Maddow.
Thank you. It's called Drift, now in paperback. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is. Please welcome Rachel Maddow. Happy birthday.
Thank you. You can call me anything you want.
No, I don't know why. It's that push-pull thing. Somebody says push, you pull, and vice versa. I know who you are, and that's all that counts.
On the playground, it was handy to be called Mad Cow.
Ooh.
So that was nice.
Handy to be called Mad Cow.
Well, it just converts easily to a convenient grade school insult.
What did you do for your birthday? When was it, by the way?
Monday.
Oh, wow. Fresh birthday.
40. Thank you. It's better than the alternative.
No, you look like a kid.
Oh,
you look like a kid, for God's sakes.
My first day of being 40, which was Tuesday, I went and had my first ever boxing lesson.
Boxing? Now, why boxing, for God's sake?
I don't know. I've never wanted to do it before. I think something about turning 40, I don't know, you feel weak. You feel
really?
out of control or something. I don't know. I'd never wanted to do it before, but I went and I had my first boxing lesson.
And how did that go?
You know, I can't feel my hands. Like, it's just really, like, it's very, I've never done anything that I guess involves that, but I'm just, like, typing my show now. It's like,
oh, no.
Like, they're just limp. I don't have any, like, my wrists hurt. I didn't even know those were muscles.
Forget your hands. Are you wearing headgear?
No. You're
not wearing headgear?
No.
Well, what if you get hit?
I'm not that advanced yet. Nobody's hitting back. I think day one.
Not really boxing, is it? If nobody's hitting back.
Kinder boxing garden.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's lesson 2.
Now you went to Stanford.
Yeah.
And you recently tell me the story about when you were an undergrad there.
Oh, there was this.
This is an elite school, isn't it?
I was very surprised to get in. I did not expect that it was going to go that way. But there was this weird thing about getting in. I think there's a common thing among people who get into a school like that. Everybody thinks they're a fraud. Everybody thinks, oh, I hope they don't notice that I was a mistake. They weren't really supposed to let me in. And I felt that way. But there was something weird.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You felt that you did not deserve or belong at Stanford?
I felt like a criminal being there. I felt like I had stolen some deserving smart person's spot. And that I was going to be found out at any moment, and they're going to handcuff me and march me out of there.
But you're the smartest person I know.
That's very nice.
I mean, I realize that's damning with faint praise, but nonetheless, so you had insecurities about being there.
Grave insecurities. I have grave insecurities about everything. I still have that. I still have that feeling that I'm a criminal taking some other more deserving person's television show every night.
No, absolutely not.
But when there was I don't even know how it arose. There was a lawsuit or something when I was a freshman, my first year in school, where the result of the lawsuit was that we were allowed to go look at our admissions files to find out exactly like what number you were getting let into the class. They didn't let us take copies or anything, but we got to go look at our files. And so I went one day, a few months after getting into the school that I felt like I was a criminal for going to, and I went and looked at my file, and it turns out I was like basically the last person let into my class. So my insecurity was completely supported by the facts.
Isn't that crazy, though? Now, I'll bet, though, you excelled at Stanford.
I did okay in the end. I was very alienated the whole, I never felt like I fit in, but I've decided that's actually my greatest, that's like my superpower.
Right.
I never ever fit in, and that forces me to struggle out of insecurity in a way that sometimes results in success.
I'm just sick and tired, and I think it really has crossed the line of being nonsense. This ongoing politically nuanced, religiously nuanced discussion of gay marriage, gay rights. It is absolute stupidity. And here's the light that went on for me, because I don't pay attention to much other than myself, as I said earlier. Humans have the right to do what humans do. That's it. End of story. There's no argument. There's no exceptions. Humans have rights, and they get to do what humans get to do. Case closed. Good night.
That particular take on it is actually that's basically the argument that was made by the 131, whatever it was, former Republican officials who signed a brief to the court that was in support of gay marriage when the Supreme Court was considering it. They were essentially saying, from a conservative perspective, we don't want government in the middle of this. And if we support family values, more people wanting to have marriages should be a plus, not a minus. And that was the conservative argument, essentially saying the Republican Party, above all, should support this thing.
Right.
And I think that it is becoming sort of a wedge issue for Republicans, and Democrats are essentially almost unanimously in support now.
Right. Well, it's beyond embarrassing when you think about it now, because it's exclusionary based on what? Well, nothing really, other than the fear people have generated of who knows what.
The Defense of Marriage Act, which is the federal law, that was part of what was...
That was a mistake too, wasn't it?
Even Bill Clinton, who signed it, says it was a mistake.
And you know what I liked about him? He said he signed it for political reasons. Well, right there you go. It should not have political reasoning there.
But the one thing that's interesting is that even if the court says the Defense of Marriage Act is constitutional and should stay, I actually feel like with Bill Clinton saying I signed it but it was wrong, with so many Republicans coming out and saying it was wrong, with basically every Democrat coming out and saying it was wrong, with the military coming out and saying, you know what, we do not want to have to discriminate between our troops. So some of our troops get their spouses recognized and can use the PX and go to daycare and everything, but some of our troop spouses can't because of this Defense of Marriage Act, with the Pentagon even on the side against it. Even if the Supreme Court leaves it standing, I feel like it might get repealed.
And Proposition 8 in California, I'm confused. Which that outlawed gay marriage or it supported gay marriage?
It was a constitutional amendment outlawing gay marriage, and the government of the state of California said, we realize that this was passed by the people of the state, but we think it's unconstitutional and we're not going to defend it. So it ended up being sort of a procedure soup at the Supreme Court in terms of who's allowed to defend it and what standing they have to support it. Because of that, that might be a very narrow ruling on the California part of it. But on the Defense of Marriage Act, about whether there can be a federal law that says the federal government has to discriminate between types of marriages and accept some of them and not others, I think that's going to go.
It's just puzzling, isn't it? Puzzling. All right, we'll be right back here with Rachel Maddow.
It's Solid Gold Entertainment tomorrow as Dave welcomes Martin Short and Tyler the Creator. Do you have an extra postage stamp that's lying around and getting in the way? Put it on an envelope addressed to Extra Postage Stamp, care of The Late Show, 1697 Broadway, New York, New York, 10019. Problem solved.
Rachel Maddow is here. Yeah, I would like to, I see where now President Obama's passing out ambassadorships. Could I be an ambassador? I'd like to go to Canada.
I think you could go to Canada more easily than waiting for your ambassadorship.
Well,
you could wait,
sure,
but you could just visit.
I would, but could I be considered? Because, you know, what are the qualifications for an ambassador?
I have no idea, but it seems like it's usually people who raised a lot of money.
Well, there you go.
The president. Yeah.
Case closed. Oh, for the president.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I think just generically raising money.
Paul and I would be an excellent combination because Paul...
We could raise money.
He has dual citizenship.
Yes, I do.
He could be, we'd be buddies up there in Ottawa.
Yeah.
It would be fantastic.
Hang out.
He'd be in charge of music.
Yeah, and we can go over to the French Canada. Forget it.
Exactly.
Forget it. It's wild. It's wild over there.
Are we making any progress with the gun control and so forth there?
Connecticut today is moving on gun reform legislation. And it's interesting because Connecticut is obviously where Newtown happened in December, and a lot of people expected, they've got a Democratic governor, Democrats control both houses of the legislature, and that's where the massacre happened. Maybe they would go first in terms of passing stricter gun laws, and they decided not to. And even though the Democrats could have done it themselves, they decided they would rather go slower and work with the Republicans, who they did not have to work with, to come up with legislation that was consensus, that was going to get bipartisan support. And they waited longer. They didn't go first. New York and Colorado went before them. And what they are putting forward is really original. It's not what other states are doing. And I think by this time tomorrow, it'll be signed into law. Connecticut's going to move forward.
Again, forgive me, but this now is encouraging for a larger movement, state by state, is how it has to progress?
Maybe. I mean, obviously we don't have boundaries between states that allow for, one state's laws to be necessarily determinative of what happens in that state. So federal law is what makes the bigger difference. But it may be that the way they worked on it in Connecticut could be a model for what could happen federally. I mean, like in Connecticut, for example, one of the things they came up with is that in the same way there are sex offender registries, where if you commit a crime that's on this list of sex offenses, once you get out of jail, have to report to the local police and let them know you're in town. They would do that for certain violent gun felonies. That seems like the kind of thing that Democrats and Republicans working together with the sort of tough on crime attitude toward it might reasonably come up with. That's not the sort of thing you come up with if you're just pandering for votes. It's actually trying to get at the problem. And it's constructive.
Are there other pro-gun organizations beyond the NRA that we're not aware of that have a lower profile than in the NRA?
Yes. One of them is headquartered in Newtown, Connecticut.
Really?
Yeah. And there are other sort of splinter gun groups, but there's also groups like Hunters for Gun Safety and Hunters for Gun Reform. There's a lot of gun-owning groups that don't align with the NRA.
If say the NRA, and I have no particular beef with the NRA, except I think there might be a smarter way for them to present their case, and that would be let's solve this problem, let's work together because we want to protect legitimate gun owners, we want to keep the guns out of hands of maniacs. They would have a more positive approach to this problem. That would be enormous, wouldn't it? Because politicians seem to be afraid of the NRA.
Yes. We're in a weird situation right now, like on the issue of background checks. Nobody says if you're adjudicated mentally ill or if you're an ex-felon, you ought to be able to buy a gun. But the current law says, well, 40% of the times we sell a gun, we're not going to check that. Well, that's ridiculous, and that's why 90% of Americans think there ought to be a background check on every gun sale.
Right.
The NRA used to support that. But this time around, they've decided to say, if you support that, you want to take everybody's guns away and there's going to be mass confiscation of everybody's hunting rifles. It's nonsense. It's conspiratorial nonsense, but they're not trying to be helpful or solve a problem. Yeah, they're trying to be absolutist.
I remember years and years and years ago, prior to the time when cars in this country had safety equipment. No seat belts, no airbags, no nothing. And I guess it was federal legislation and Ralph Nader and the government. And now we take it for granted, and it didn't affect car sales 1 inch. Right. People were happier to have car sales. So if the NRA or other groups adopted that sort of policy or philosophy, I think we'd make real progress and everybody would feel better, but rather than being afraid of them for guns.
There's a lot of stuff that a vast majority of Americans support that wouldn't take guns away from law-abiding people by any stretch of the imagination. Right now, if you're on the terrorist watch list, you can buy a gun. You can't fly.
No, you can't fly.
But you can buy a gun or explosives. You're allowed to buy.
You can sit in the lobby and clean your gun, but you're not getting on a plane.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Could we move on that? No.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
You're a convicted felon. You can buy a gun from a guy in a tent, but not a guy under a roof.
What
really?
about that?
That's the rule?
They took away Justin Bieber's monkey.
That's also shocking.
Sure. Yeah. You get to work on that one.
If you were ambassador to Canada, you could hook him up.
I would do something. I'd get him
his monkey back.
Yeah, I'll get your monkey back, son. Well, Drift, the best-selling book now available in paperback. There it is right there, Rachel Maddow from The Rachel Maddow Show. We'll be right back with The Flaming Lift. Good to see you again.